Hi, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society. We are so pleased to have for our interview today former Mayor Shawn Pfaff, who is here to speak about the library and his part as mayor in bringing about the library in Fitchburg. So, Mayor Pfaff, if I may ask you,
yes.
So good to have you with us. As mayor, when the Fitchburg Library was being built and opened, what was your involvement in the process of bringing the library to completion in the summer of 2011?
Well, thank you for having me and for covering this very important recent historical moment in Fitchburg's history. I was involved in the library as someone who was a citizen resident that moved here in the early 2000s. And I love Fitchburg for a lot of reasons, but there were a few things that were really missing that brought us together as a community. And one of those was a library. And I was excited to see a group get organized and the real vision of Bill Linton and Pro Mega to put $1 million in before we even had the concept going to talk about a library. So I'll never forget, Fitchburg started talking about their library, and then they had a referendum. I was involved in trying to get the referendum passed as a private citizen. And then I ran for office for a lot of reasons in Fitchburg, but one of them was I just knew that we needed to get this library built. So I was involved as mayor and city council member right at a time when the library was passed in a referendum, had to go through the city council, which was not easy, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. And then as mayor, getting the funding and working with department heads and the community and the council, which was not an easy lift at times, to get this library up and running. So it was opened in 2011, June of 2011, but that crucial time was from about August of 2009 till we opened in June of 2011. And I was involved in that part in a lot of capacities.
Right. I was just going to say, in so many different pieces of that you needed to kind of keep balancing and up in the air to keep them going. Yeah. Well, can you describe your interest in having a library for the Fitchburg community?
I think it was one of the most important things we had done in recent history in Fitchburg, and I'll tell you why. Fitchburg is a wonderful community, located halfway between the fastest growing business in Wisconsin, Epic, and downtown Madison. But it was a township. You know this from your family's roots of how we were created. Not one school district, 3. And that can be a real dividing factor, or it can be something that we try to unify. So we were missing things that were unifying this community. Fitchburg's placemaking. What makes Fitchburg? People always kind of said on the outside, well, what is Fitchburg? You don't have a downtown or whatever. One of the things I really wanted as a community, and what I guess my electoral career was about timing, I just knew this library was a community connector. It didn't matter what station in life you were, where your parents came from. A library allowed the community to have its place. And Fitchburg was one of the first, when we opened the library in 2011, we were one of the few communities in the United States that had never had a library before when we opened it. So we built on that library and we brought people together. It wasn't easy. Where the location was, what communities could be served. Did we need a library in the era of phones and internets, now smartphones? And then also the question about, is it something that will really bring the community together? But I felt, and I knew that the movement and the passion of the Friends of the Fitchburg Library, the business community, knew this was not only good for young people to use and adults, but also just connecting Fitchburg as a community. And we built from that. We did a splash pad park. We did other things, but this was really the impetus to bring modern Fitchburg together.
Wonderful explanation, Shawn, of the reasoning behind having a library, which has to do with building community as its essence. Thank you. So public officials, such as yourself, are charged, of course, with balancing public services with the ability to pay for them. So what was the financial picture for the city of Fitchburg's point of view to the question of being able to afford a library? And then what had to happen financially for the city to then approve the building of a library?
This is a great question. A graduate school thesis could be written on this. Hopefully someday somebody does. And this was really where I think it was crucial that we had the community, the right leadership at City Hall, who could manage through the process, but also manage expectations and then ultimately get it done. A couple things happened. Before I was involved in the city council, the city of Fitchburg went to the voters in 2008. Big election. President Obama, not president at the time, was running, so huge interest in that election. On that lowest part of that ballot were two questions. Basically, does Fitchburg want a library? And the answer was yes. Does Fitchburg want to pay for it? They split the question. No. Here we are. Classic Fitchburg, and I say that very respectfully. Where do we go from there? In fact, I remember in 2008, it was November of 2008, I went as a resident to the city hall and spoke. And I said, I came to this community and my wife came to this community because we wanted to be a community and we have to build a library. In fact, Channel 3 pulled me aside afterwards and interviewed me just randomly. And it kind of set the impetus for me to run for office because elections were up at that time. Mayor Clowder decided not to run again. And the real question in that first city council from 2009 to 2011 is how are we going to fund this? We want it, but we don't want to pay for it. It was a big step for us, and it was a big step of we don't need one, we have an existing Dane County library system. Why would you replace that? You're going to put the library down on the southern end of the Fishhatchee Road, so kids from North Fishhatchee Road, some disparities between the two neighborhoods. All of those questions were done. Keep in mind the generosity of the business community. Bill Linton of ProMega put in $1 million before we even started this, which was incredible. So the commitment was there. But we had to answer those two questions, and so it was $10 million. And we worked through that. Then at the end, classic, I remember that, and I'm sure Fact TV has the footage. We should add geothermal. Well, who's going to pay for that? Geothermal, very visionary. I support it, but it was an extra $500,000 that we hadn't gone to the taxpayers on. So my memory isn't totally clear. It's pretty good on this, so I don't want to misspeak, but we ultimately got through, so it was $10.5 million. But that was just the building. Moving forward, you can't open half of a library. You can't have 3 people and say, hey, we're only open from 3 to 7 because we don't have employees. We've seen that a lot now post-COVID with businesses, unfortunately. State standard says you have to have a certain square footage. That's why it cost as much as it did. State law also said you have to be open through Monday through Sunday, and you have to have a certain number of staff on. So we had to hire staff immediately. So it was a construction piece of $10.5 million. Then, got through that, pulled some bullets out, arrows out of the chest and back, and all that stuff. And then we had to fund it of who was going to staff it. So that was really an interesting piece of this, which I found fascinating. I was pleased that I had at the time, the support of the community, trusted me and others at City Hall. I can never thank Tony Roach, our former city manager, enough. He kept reminding me, Shawn, just because you build it, you've got to fill it. So the community was there, and the community was there, and I'm forever grateful. It wasn't easy, but the community in the end, and the friends of the library, the business community, and just citizens really wanted it, and that helped us ultimately get it funded and staffed.
Great, great, and a lot of effort to put into making that happen. From and you know all the intimate details that went into that, Shawn. Would you, just switching a little bit to the library itself and the design of the new library, can you tell us about what considerations went into the way the library is structured? We're sitting here in this beautiful structure right now today. What were some of the design elements?
Forever grateful to a woman named Deborah Johnson, who was our consultant advisor, and sadly she passed away way too young after we finished this project. But she came in and gave us really good direction. I was on the library board as a city council member, and I had a chance to work with great community leaders, Mary Kay Zimbrick, Phil Sveum, other folks like that really wanted this, represented parts of Fitchburg, business community leaders. In fact, Mary Kay Zimbrick traveled all around the U.S. to get ideas about the library and what we should do. But the key piece here, the bedrock, was we had to be a certain square footage because of our population. That was the state law. You just couldn't have a lean-to, but you didn't need a Taj Mahal because you had a budget of $10.5 million. So what we wanted was modern architecture and things like that, but also something that brought out the character of Fitchburg. I didn't know you at the time, but I was really pleased that the Fitchburg Historical Society has a room in this building. It is so important to capture that history, and I know you're doing a great job telling that story throughout your interviews. But the library itself, we had to have a certain teen section, we had to have young adults, and one of the biggest things, and the community really stepped up, and you'll see that on some of the walls, is the conference rooms. Not just the big room where we have our annual meetings and stuff, or the boardroom where we have our board meetings, but just the individual conference rooms. You could sign out at an era of where people, self-employed and can work from home more and more, they come here and work. And community members stepped up and funded that, $20,000, $30,000. So we're able to get the consultant piece through Deborah Johnson, community leaders that had input. One funny side story I'll tell you. I was on the library board 2009 to 2011 when I was on the council, and they put me on the Furnitures, Fixtures, and Equipment Committee. And that's where you can take everything in the building, shake it upside down, it falls to the ground. That's a furniture, fixture, equipment. I was charged with others, unfortunately others took care of this, to pick out furniture and designs. Well, come to find out, I'm a tad colorblind. I'm glad that somebody else was able to do that. I realized my weaknesses were not picking out red and greens, because I have a little trouble with that sometimes. So it was really fun to see how the design went. But the key point I want to make is we had to have a certain set size because of the size of our community based on state law. That's why you have, I think it's 64,000 square feet. If you give me a little room on that, I think it's 64,000 square feet. And the thing that I enjoy, I know we'll get to that later, but I wanted a room where I could come back in the day and read the paper. I don't know if there's papers anymore, but I'm dating myself, but I wanted a place where I could come and chill out and read the paper. So that was a big part of it as well.
So and as I was coming into the library today, again, seeing those study rooms, those private spaces, so well used. Obviously, part of the design that has really come forward to be very important to people.
One of the things I think real quickly that I think is underutilized, and there was a heck of a debate at the time, was underground parking. On a day like today where it's a little rainy and blustery, I always use the underground parking, and I urge you as residents of the city, use the underground parking. It's fantastic. But that was a huge kind of debate at the time. Is that too much of a bell and whistle? Do we need that? I'm glad they did it, because it is the right thing to do. And I actually use it all the time. So it's a best kept secret in this library.
Because it's underground and
exactly. Don't have to get cold.
Which is a great place for it. So what were the challenges as the library was actually undergoing construction?
Well, great question. And I want to thank Wendy Rawson, who's still here, a good friend of the Fitchburg Historical Society, as you know. Big fan of Wendy. Wendy took the job when the library was still a hole in the ground. She was the librarian who came here, and I'm always tease her in a good way when I see her. You took a job with a hole in the ground. And what do I mean by that? We had to start programming and planning programming, and Wendy and her expertise, and again, Deb, the consultant, worked with Wendy to get her kind of unloaded, if you will, to do her job, to build this library and then be ready to open day one. What kind of programming are we going to get? We had the numbers, and Wendy can get into this more, of what Dane County Library bookmobile or whatever would tell you, 26,000 a month or whatever the number was. But to be able to plan that, and then the programming side, to get the actual books was big. Another huge conversation was about where we were going to put the money in. I think it was a couple $100,000, I might be wrong, to have that automatic book drop out here, which is important. You can get out of your car, don't have to get out of your car, drop it in. That was a big debate at the time. And I'm glad we did that, because it's a no-brainer now. But all of those pieces had to go together. But the key piece to this, almost as intense as opening a restaurant, but you have to have state law for my comparison. We had to have all the books and all the bells and whistles ready to go on day one. Just like a restaurant's got to have enough plates and forks and knives and things like that, because people were going to come, but state law demanded that we were ready to go. So that wasn't easy to do that, and Wendy got here. Fortunately, we budgeted for her to come, I believe, 6-7 months in advance, so she could get herself geared up. And then we started layering in staff, and we had to stagger kind of the budget of how we did that. And on day one, lights were on and the library was open.
And I think that's the perfect lead into my next question, which was actually about opening day at the library.
Yes.
And it must have been such an exciting day for so many people who had put in just effort and time, financial resources, et cetera, to make this happen. Can you describe what it was like and how you felt that day?
Well, that was one of my, besides opening the Splash Pad Park, which I'm near and dear, and I love that park, the library opening was just incredibly moving for me for a lot of reasons. Because again, like I said earlier, it was a community that never had had a library before. And to get that sense of community, we did it out here kind of on the promenade out here as you walk in on Lacey Road. And we had probably 150, 200 people. They were great community leaders. Maybe had some folks even from the governor's office came, former mayors came. We really did it right. Fact TV actually did a lot of capturing of the data, or of the moment. Channel 3 did a live shot that morning. Channel 15 was here, Channel 27. I felt great because it really took Fitchburg to the next level. I know that it's very difficult, I'm not going to say never, but it's very difficult for us to get our own school district. I understand that from my background working in public service. This was what was really going to tie us together. And I really appreciated the fact that it allowed us to open up a public building where it didn't matter what your parents' income was or whatever. You could come in here, it didn't matter the color of your skin. And I knew that that was a place where this community was taking the next step. And if we built this library, again, halfway between Epic and downtown Madison, the sky was the limit for us. So I felt prideful. I have to admit it's nice to have my name on the building. That's nice as well. But if I could fast forward 4 months from that day, it was almost to the day, we had Halloween here. And that, I'm sure Fact TV has some of that footage. To see kids come all over, north side of Fish Hatchery Road, rural Fitchburg, suburban neighborhoods, and come in here and enjoy this beautiful building that was open. Many of them have never been in there before. And it was really neat to see that play out. And it kind of made sitting at those city council meetings till 11:45, getting the crap beat out of you, worth it, because it was really interesting, but inclusive of our community.
Mm-hmm. So the vision that you had when you began recognizing how much a library would mean to you and to the community, to see that actually come to fruition, just gave you such a sense of pride and sense of the community coming together. This is the place where everyone from the community is always welcome and feels at home.
Yeah, and my, just in comparison at the time, a real close family member of mine was working on building a library in their little rural township back where I'm from at the same time. And they were unsuccessful. They couldn't get it through their public referendum and stuff like that. So to have a community that wanted it, that put its skin in the game. There's some people in this community that have never been here. There's some folks that think it's a waste of money when you got a smartphone and the internet. What do you need? Why would you need some big Taj Mahal like that? But overall, I believe 12, 13 years later, the community couldn't be more proud of what we've done, because yes, people can come in here and the staff, many of the staff have been here since day one, because it's a very wonderful place to work. But it also demonstrates that Fitchburg was committed to being a modern city. And from our journey that you know very well from your upbringing, to get to where we are now, I think this building is a tangible sign that Fitchburg really has done its part, thanks to the generosity of the residents of the city, to be a modern community without losing its rural roots and neighborhoods and things like that. So that's what I'm really so pleased with going on. And people to this day still come up to me and thank me, and I appreciate that. And it was part of the job, and I was glad it was the right time, the right guy at the right time to help be part of this.
As well as the right people in the community, in the business and the community, in the neighborhoods, in Friends of the Public Library, Fitchburg Public Library, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Truly a community effort. One final question, Shawn, and that is any personal memory? You talked about the Halloween party here.
Yeah.
Anything else that you spent on the project that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, I still use my library cards, so I'm proud of that. I would say personally, I enjoy the library, as I said, because the underground parking stuff, but I kind of like to slip over here quietly and look through the historical section of the library. The travel section I look at a lot. I've used that a lot. But personally, to be able to, when the day was done in that late June day of June of 2011, at the time, my staff person who worked closely was Marcy Rakowski. And I love Marcy, and if she's watching, I hope she knows how much I miss her. I looked at her and I said, Marcy, we did something big here. This will be remembered for a long time, that you and I both will be gone, but for generations, kids and families and visitors can come and use this. And I'm just amazed by how many people use our community room. I see meetings, you know, we all get invited to meetings. The number of meetings that are held in our library community room is just phenomenal, because Fitchburg is such an ideally located place in Dane County. That is a personal memory that I will remember of what we did when we opened it up. And as I mentioned, the Halloween night was something that was forever instilled in my mind, because to see the joy and the moms and the dads and the parents coming, and you know, Halloween costume a little different than when I was a kid. Could never get the mask off when I was a kid, but now, you know, see these kids come in with these Halloween costumes. I don't know if they still do that here at the library. I hope they do. But it was a wonderful experience to see that firsthand and to greet kids. And one kid actually at the time came up and he said, "You were the guy that opened the library." I said, "Well, we all did." So anyway.
Shawn, I see the joy on your face.
Thank you.
Just that sense of what the journey has been for you in bringing this beautiful facility to the public, the
Thank you.
Fitchburg community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.